Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started.
Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I am your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley. And unfortunately, my mom, Dr. Gloria Horsley, couldn't be here today, so I'm going to be doing this solo. And I'm looking forward to having a show on healing after sudden and traumatic loss. And our guest today will be Vanessa Francis. So Vanessa lost her husband, Rick, to suicide in March of 2016. She found meaning in tragedy by volunteering with Heartache to Hope, a local charity that provides support to suicide loss grievers. Vanessa also volunteers with Soaring Spirits Canada for their Camp Widow program, where she co-leads the Suicide Support Circle and is on the Love After Loss panel. So welcome to our podcast, Vanessa.
Thank you, Heidi. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay, so as you said, I lost my husband, Rick, in March 2016 to suicide. We had been together for almost 20 years. We met, he's from the States, the US. He was transferred up here. He got promoted. And then when he moved here back in 1994, so almost, 30 years ago now, he wanted to know anybody. So he wanted to meet people, specifically a partner. So he signed up with a matchmaker. We didn't have online dating back then. So it was a matchmaker. That's what she was called. And I did as well. And she was advertising in the local professional newspaper. And we both signed up. And then she goes to your home and meets both of you. She met and met my husband and thought, oh, they would be a good match. And she was right. So that's how we met. And so we were together for 20 years. We adopted our daughter. She was born in the US as well. And she was 13 when my husband passed away, and she is now 22. And so he died. He wasn't diagnosed with depression at all. In fact, I spoke with his doctor after he passed to see if he had talked to her about anything like that. And no, he hadn't. We didn't see anything coming. It was completely out of the blue. That morning we had breakfast. My daughter and I went away for the day. We came back and he was gone. And so it was, looking back, there were some signs. There were some things, oh yeah, I should have paid attention to that. But you can't beat yourself up about those things. And I certainly did for a long time. But so completely out of the blue, everybody that knew him knew it was so out of character. He seemed like to be a happy-go-lucky guy. In fact, his boss, where he worked, said, oh my gosh, he was such a jovial guy. I'll never forget. He said the word jovial. And he was quiet. He was a quiet person, but he had a quick wit and he was really funny and he was kind and the greatest dad and a great husband.
And what was his name, Vanessa?
Rick.
Rick, that's what you said. Okay. Yeah. Wow. I'm just thinking, how sudden and how traumatic this is. I mean, here you are with Rick. He's got this great reputation. You were pretty blindsided. All of a sudden, you've lost your husband and you are a single parent. And I would imagine it's an identity loss too. It's like, okay, who am I now that my husband's not here?
Right. Totally blindsided, didn't see the sun, just out of the blue. So yeah, you're trying to navigate, one day you're in a family of 3 and the next day you're a family of 2. And it's very difficult. As you know, I know you've had other people that lost someone to suicide on your podcast. And as you know, it's traumatic. And you have all those questions.
So tell me a little bit about, I know I read somewhere where at first you weren't sure, you were a little hesitant about mentioning suicide, and then you realized that you could be an advocate and build awareness for suicide loss, which I love. Yes. Because you really can. What is different about suicide loss versus another kind of like sudden loss, like an accident, let's say? What is different,
Right.
would you say?
I think it's well, it's sudden, and I think also you have questions about the why. I think that is the big thing,
Mhm.
is why, and how did I miss the clues? And do people think, like, the shame of it? Do people think, well, you were living with him, how did you not see the signs? Like, I know no one
Mhm.
ever said that to me. I never felt that, but there is a bit of the shame and the blame, and regret that I didn't, ask him questions about how are you doing. Like, he was always tired. That's the kind of person he was. Even
Mhm.
his mom said that he would go to bed as a toddler, put himself to bed. Like, he was, and he needed a lot of sleep. And I just thought that was, part of his DNA, but there was more going on than that. There was a real apathy that was happening with him. And so,
But like you said, that could be a lot of people. So understandable why that wouldn't raise any red flags for you. Did
yeah.
you feel like people gave you as much support as they would of other traumatic losses, or did you feel like people didn't know what to say, so they didn't say anything? I don't know. Did you feel support?
Felt support from immediate family for sure, especially my
Hmm.
sisters, immediate family and close friends for sure. I felt that. And if I met somebody when I was at the grocery store and they said, oh, sorry about your husband, how did he, what happened? I would kind of gauge, do I need to tell this person, what
Hmm.
truly happened? And sometimes I said, oh, he passed away suddenly, or tragically. But I wouldn't say, if I didn't know the person, I wouldn't reveal too much, because
Hmm.
especially at the beginning. Now it's different. Now, if people ask me, I share, I talk about it on my social media. I want to, give a voice to people that have lost someone to suicide, and also people that have suicidal thoughts themselves. So I want to kind of help end the stigma around suicide, because there is a huge stigma about it. I mean, yeah, there's a stigma around death in general and people talking about death and grief, but I think suicide is an extra layer of trauma around it.
Absolutely. What do you think helped you?
Well, I wrote a blog post about this a few years ago, and there was a few things. Yeah, certainly friends and family for sure. Having that support circle of a few people, doesn't have to be a big group of people, but people that you can talk to, like my one sister, that you can be your authentic self with, and and share how you're feeling. So therapy, I went right into therapy, and I still see the same therapist 8 years later.
Hmm.
We don't always talk about grief now, we talk about other life things. Took courses to be a yoga teacher years ago, decades ago. So I joined my local hot yoga studio, which I've never done before. And I did like these 30-day challenges where you're doing hot yoga every day for 30 days. And I
Wow.
and I would do that. They offered it twice a year and I did it. But during the year I would go like every other day. And because I really believe trauma is held in your body. And
Hmm.
there's something about being in that hot room, and just getting all those toxins out, getting all that bad energy out, and getting in touch with yourself too, like the breathing. And I cried in that room. I don't know if anybody heard me or even knew, but on my mat there were a lot of tears shed during that first year, I would say. So yoga definitely helped me.
Vanessa, I love that you turned to yoga, because there has been so much research done about the benefits of doing yoga when you've had any trauma or any kind of loss. And like you said, hot yoga to get all those toxins out. I mean,
Yes.
what a great thing to do, and what a great thing to challenge yourself to do after this traumatic loss of your husband.
Thank you. I
So,
highly recommend it. Yes.
mhm.
Yeah, I'm
And you,
devoted.
and I know at one point you found Camp Widow. Can you tell us a little bit about Camp Widow and how that
Yes.
helped you?
Yes, I love that organization. I didn't even know about them till 2019 when I met my partner. So I've repartnered. I met Greg in 2019. I hadn't even heard about them. In fact, I didn't seek out any groups at all. It wasn't until I met Greg that I found out about all these organizations. So Yeah, Camp Widow is part of Soaring Spirits International. We now have Soaring Spirits Canada, which is a separate entity. And Camp Widow is the event that they do once a year. The program itself has changed, as you probably know, in the US. But in Canada, we're keeping our in-person format, which is a 3-day camp full of workshops and just being in community with other people that lost someone, lost a partner. And they don't
And Greg
have,
is the partner that introduced
yes,
you to this. And
yes,
is he a widower?
he is. He is a
Oh,
widower.
wow.
Yeah, and he actually is on the board of directors for Soaring Spirits Canada. And
Okay.
and he does a Love After Loss panel with me, and he runs their men group. He runs their men group virtually. He volunteers. He gives back. We both do, because that's how we find meaning in the losses, right? So
I love that you found each other and you both come from a place where your partners have died. As you know, my mother lost my father in 2020, and she has since found a boyfriend who is now her fiance. And you know this, Vanessa, because you met her in Tampa, but she has written this book, Open
yes,
to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating. So for anyone out there that has had a loss, please go and get the book. And Vanessa, I love that you and Greg found each other again
yes,
after both coming from a place of death, basically losing your partners.
yes,
So,
yeah.
so I think when you're at Camp Widow, do you have opportunities to connect one-on-one with other people that have had suicide losses?
Yes. So there's a suicide circle. It's
Mm.
I run it with another woman who lost her partner to suicide. They don't have to be married. They could be living with somebody. It could be um, as a partner.
That's great, especially nowadays. That's important.
Yes. So yeah, for me, it was the first time I was with other people that lost somebody that way. When I attended my first Camp Widow in 2019 in Toronto, and I didn't even know anybody that had lost somebody to suicide. So it was very, very healing. Very, there's so much in telling your stories, right? Telling our
Mhm.
stories and sort of supporting each other. So
So what advice would you give somebody out there that has just had a suicide loss and doesn't know if they're ever going to find hope again?
that there will be hope. That it takes time. It takes time, and give yourself compassion, because I don't wish this on anybody. It's really, really difficult, but you can get through it, and through, therapy, friends, um, and just being open, as your mom's book says, being open to love.
Mhm.
And I wasn't ready to date for 2 whole years. I didn't even think about it. I went on the dating sites, did the dating sites for a year, and then I had no luck. And I gave it a year, and then I walked into a meetup. I didn't even know what meetup was, and Greg was there with some people, and I met him there. And wanted to have that, because I think we innately want to, be loved and be in love with someone.
Mhm.
So yeah, just
And what about somebody out there that is in the situation that you were in, where all of a sudden they have a teenage child and are the only parent? They're now parenting and they're grieving. What advice would you give the parents out there about raising their children after a suicide loss?
yeah, just to listen to them, just to be there for them, just to create normalcy with them, because it's the teenage years are hard. As you know, I think you've
Hmm.
kids as well, so it's hard. But also having a loss of a parent to suicide on top of that, it's difficult. My daughter had mental health issues even before her dad passed, and so I was always in tune with like how she's feeling, how she's doing. And I'm not going to lie, the high school years were difficult for us, but we made it through. She's 22 now. She's thriving. She's doing well now, but it was rough. I would just say, just be there for them. Maya never wanted to talk about her dad at all. I couldn't cry in front of her. I had to hide my grief from her. She didn't want to even acknowledge it. She was too much in shock and too much in trauma. But it's different now. But it was
Well, I'm
really rough.
glad you got help for yourself so that
Mhm.
you had a place that could go support you. And like you said, our children are constantly changing and becoming, and they're not stagnant people. And teenage years, as you know, Vanessa, are really stressful and some of the hardest times to lose a parent. So I am so glad that you've navigated those waters and she is now 22 and doing well. And I'm happy that you're in this place and have met another person in your life, because our hearts are big and we can find other people to love again after loss.
Absolutely.
And thank you for building awareness out there for suicide loss, because it, like you said, is a stigmatized loss. And hopefully with people like you talking about it so candidly, that will change. Do you see it changing a little bit? Have you seen it change since you've been out there talking about it, or do you still feel like it's fairly stigmatized?
I think there's a lot more to do, but in Canada, we have something called Bell Let's Talk Day. It's a day in a year, and it shouldn't just be a day, but it's a day when people talk about it. And there's, celebrities and people in the media sharing their stories and shining a light on it. So I think it is changing, but I think we have a lot more to do with it for sure.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being on today.
Thank
And
you
thank
so
you
much.
for talking about Rick and sharing him with us also, and your journey.
Thank
And
you.
we always like to say, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.